This video is brought to you by Squarespace. So you want to write a story, be it a book, movie, audio drama, whatever, but you're stuck. You wouldn't quite call it writer's block, you're just looking for that spark. Maybe you've got a mountain of story ideas, but for whatever reason you're struggling to picture the cast of characters needed to start the adventure. Maybe crafting original and compelling characters comes hard for you. You don't want to resort to fan fiction, which will never find its way onto the marketplace. You can't just use characters you don't have the rights to, right? You want to find a way to get popular characters into your story while still maintaining some semblance of novelty, or maybe you're just looking for inspiration from classic stories with proven characters. Well, there's good news. All of that and more can be had in the public domain. Public domain consists of creative works to which exclusive intellectual property rights no longer apply. Those rights may have expired, been forfeited, waived, or because of the age of the work, entirely non-existent. The works of William Shakespeare and Beethoven, for instance, are in the public domain because they were created before the concept of copyright even existed. Lots of older films and books are in the public domain because their copyright term has expired. This means there are plenty of classic characters that you as a writer have every right to use in your own original works, but sorting through all those public domain personalities is a tall order. Some of them simply don't stand up to modern storytelling, and some of them have already been successfully reimagined in pop culture. Trying to reinvent them again probably wouldn't go over well with audiences that have fallen in love with these current incarnations. So today I'll share with you 10 public domain characters that are in need of a retelling, with the hopes that you, dear aspiring author, yes you, will be the one to do it. To be clear, these are presented in no particular order. Ranking stories and characters is pointless. This list has been randomly sorted. Some of these characters have had more recent iterations, but they fell short. Some of them have fallen out of the zeitgeist completely, and some of them are so timeless and ubiquitous that even if Disney makes a franchise about them, there's still room for deconstruction and innovation. Let's get to it. Number 10, Sherlock Holmes. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's famous fictional detective has been remade and reimagined countless times throughout the years, but despite thousands of authors adapting the character for stage and radio plays, TV, cinema, even tons of successful video games, there still seems to be new stories to tell. Holmes has been a cultural icon for over 100 years, has influenced mystery writing like none other, and won't be going away anytime soon. The great thing about him is that he can essentially be plugged into anything, and generally speaking, will improve the story. With such a devout fan base, you're guaranteed to find an audience, but writing Holmes is tough. His wit and intelligence requires solid writing and careful craftsmanship. If you write him wrong, the whole character and often story will fall flat, and you'll end up angering his fans by portraying him poorly. Still, if you know what you're doing, putting Sherlock into the mix will give any whodunit or thriller a solid protagonist or even antagonist to explore and redefine. Number 9, Rapunzel. The fairy tale character, like many others over the years, has received the Disney treatment, becoming a staple of pop culture, but the original tale is much, much older, placing it firmly in the public domain. The Brothers Grimm made it famous in 1812 when they adapted Friedrich Schultz's 1790 story, which itself was based on a French story published in 1698, which was inspired by an Italian story published in 1634, which further goes to show inspiration isn't theft, and stories can be told and retold any number of ways. The basics of the tale are so well known by most folks that it's a waste of time to go too in-depth. Husband and pregnant wife gets sick, husband steals some Rapunzel from a witch's garden for her to use to eat, witch gets mad, takes the baby, locks her in a tower, child grows up to be a beautiful princess with long flowing hair, yada yada yada, and a handsome prince has to stumble around blindly in the wilderness. The basic tale has been adapted and deconstructed many times over the years, but there's still plenty of story dynamics that could be explored, plot points flipped on their heads, and wrenches thrown into the mix to breathe new life into this old story. Number 8, Dracula. Count Dracula was originally introduced in the 1897 Bram Stoker horror novel and touched off many literary genres like the Gothic novel and, well, pretty much all forms of vampire stories. Yes, all forms. And while vampires seem like so 2008 these days, returning to the genre's roots and giving the character of Dracula a spin might give some of you aspiring horror authors a proven playground to experiment in. Fair warning, Dracula, like Sherlock, has become so widely used and even recognized that the character has almost become a parody of itself at this point, but hey, I'm sure they were saying that about Rapunzel in the 1600s, but Disney still recently managed to get $600 million out of that one. So if Dracula and its influence has reached a point of market oversaturation, how would you use the character in a new and exciting way? You won't know till you sit down to write, but you can be sure that in so doing, you're in for a bloody good time. We really doing that joke? I thought I cut it. Number 7, Loch Ness Monster. You want to do a creature feature, but King Kong's legal status is too iffy, and you don't want an iconic RKO flick to compete with, plus the Slender Man thing's getting a little bit played out these days. Why not wind the clock back to 1933 Scotland and write a story based on an OG folklore monster? The creature that is said to inhabit Loch Ness in the Scottish Highlands has become nothing short of a legend. The abundance of hoaxes, alleged real-world sightings, and made-for-TV investigative specials is unparalleled, yet all these decades later, I can't think of a single noteworthy Loch Ness movie, except maybe the Scooby-Doo one-off. People, it's historic Scotland. It's a mysterious monster that dwells underwater and occasionally reveals itself to unsuspecting fishermen who drift along a large, deep, and mysterious lake. Surely somebody out there can give this story a solid fictional adaptation to set the gold standard. Look at this photo of William Dafoe and Robert Pattinson on the set of The Lighthouse. This is a film that's releasing soon, takes place around this time period. You see this? Picture that, plus this. What are you waiting for? There's a Hollywood classic in there somewhere. Go find it. Number 6, Long John Silver. The main antagonist of the 1883 Treasure Island by Robert Stevenson, Long John Silver, with his parrot on his shoulder and wooden peg leg, is basically what we all picture when we think of pirates. The character and the story are both old enough works to no longer require permission to use, but be careful that you're using the character from the original novel. Long John Silver has been around for so long that you might inadvertently use a newer adaptation for which the rights are most certainly still exclusive. Pirates were all the rage when I was growing up. There are plenty of stories in that setting still to explore, and Long John Silver provides a solid character to build around, or as a side player to give your world a bit of a jumpstart. He's cunning, he's a trickster, he's the icon of piracy. You don't need Captain Jack Sparrow for your tale on the high seas. Plug in the Pioneer Buccaneer and set sail. Number 5, Samson. Clocking in at around 550 BC, when the Book of Judges was being written during the Babylonian captivity, the story of Samson is certainly the oldest on our list. Samson's journey is filled with basically everything we love in stories. He's born with a sort of messianic promise to lead his people out of captivity. He's physically the strongest to ever live. This feeds his ego, and he goes through a period of great recklessness. His lust leads him to all kinds of bloody battles in his conflict with the Philistines. He's tempted by Delilah, loses his strength, finds redemption, and the climactic end is all too fitting. It's one of my favorite accounts from the biblical narrative. I've got a 50-minute version of this story that I've told for years now. The point is, sometimes, actually more often than not, the older the story, the better. Number 4, Paul Bunyan. Somebody needs to make a gritty, modern take on Paul Bunyan. That is all. Moving on. Number 3, Huckleberry Finn. Mark Twain's dynamic duo of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn are American classics, and while Tom Sawyer has had plenty of modern reinventions, Huck usually plays second fiddle to the more marquee character, despite the fact that he, one could argue, is actually more compelling. The son of the town drunk, Huck Finn is essentially a homeless vagabond juvenile who has to navigate both a morally confused culture and the common day-to-day adventures of boyhood. Twain always wrote Huck from a character's POV, and older readers often look back retrospectively at the original and realize that that character's life had an even darker reality that a child's voice can't fully convey. Most of Mark Twain's work is actually now old enough to be in the public domain. If you want to write a story about this time period, Huckleberry Finn might well be worth considering. Number 2, Cthulhu. Because, of course, as influential as Lovecraftian horror continues to be for science fiction writers, it's still pretty odd that there hasn't been a solid, universally acclaimed Cthulhu film made, though several folks have tried. The fictional cosmic entity has been around since 1928 and has maintained a legacy that stretches from radio dramas to short stories to video games to all kinds of merchandise, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. Cthulhu stories require the proper proper atmosphere and scope, and ability to trigger existential dread in the audience. As a character, it's almost inseparable from this theme, and there are a few prevailing theories as to why writing Cthulhu correctly is so difficult, which I'll link to in the description. If you're an aspiring sci-fi writer, you almost have to try your hand at attempting to tell a story with a character that stands out from the ordinary. It won't be easy, but the possible rewards speak for themselves. And finally, number 1, Zorro. Maybe it's a generational thing, but I was shocked at how few people around me had actually heard of Zorro. Out of the 6 people that I mentioned him to while writing this video, nobody could remember him right off the bat, so I guess here's a quick refresher. Zorro is a fictional character created in 1919 by American pulp writer AustinMcConnell. He's usually portrayed as a dashing, masked vigilante that defends townfolk from corrupt officials and general ne'er-do-wells. With his all-black costume, mask, cape, and acrobatic combat skills, he's a forerunner to brooding nighttime superheroes like Batman, but with more of a down-to-earth flair. Replace the fancy gadgets with a rapier, and you'll start to get the idea. The copyrights to the original stories, The Curse of Capistrano and The Mark of Zorro, have since lapsed, and despite numerous legal battles, U.S. courts have ruled that the character is in the public domain. So if you're wanting a sword-swinging, masked protector for your story, check the original works out and take the character for a test drive. I've been writing for a while now. There's one thing I know, and that's that it is easy to get stuck. But I've always found that it's possible to find inspiration in a truly countless number of classic works. When you find yourself hitting a creative brick wall, it may do well to look into the pages of old for direction. These stories have lasted this long for a reason, right? Yeah, our current culture has a lot of interesting characters and personalities, but if you're willing to dig a little deeper into history, you might just have a shot at the next great iteration or retelling of some of the world's greatest stories. Good luck. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you're a writer, you definitely want to have a website to put your stories on, right? Squarespace can help with that. They provide you a way to quickly put together a stunning website. Tons of beautiful templates to get you started, and they're totally customizable, so if you're planning on using it to showcase your writing, you can alter almost every nook and cranny to your liking to create a one-of-a-kind experience for your site's visitors. They've even got options for an online storefront and 24/7 customer support if you hit any bumps along the way. You can get started today for free. Why not try it out and see what Squarespace has to offer? If you decide you like the service, then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/AustinMcConnell to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.